He loves all of me, and it has absolutely nothing to do with what I do or what I don't do. And so he brings me into relationship. He loves me, and I don't have to perform. I don't have to do anything, but just like a child, just be with him and enjoy his presence and his relationship.
Welcome to the Extraordinary Lives podcast, where we talk about lives that go beyond the ordinary to the extraordinary, with the extra being Jesus. We'll be encouraged with amazing stories and helpful insights from the lives of ordinary people who have that extra, that supernatural difference that only Jesus can give. I'm your host, Ellen Bennett. Thanks for joining us.
Hi everyone, I am here with Dianne Sivulka, and I am so excited to interview her today. She has a really neat business called Travel on Purpose, in which you can book travel and do fun and touristy things and cultural things, as well as serve the people in that community. So she'll be telling us a little bit about that and also sharing with us wonderful God stories. Dianne, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ellen. Thanks for having me.
Tell me a little bit about where you grew up and how you came to know Jesus and to follow him.
Okay, well, Ellen, I have lived in California all my life. I grew up on the Central Coast, and my dad was a pastor. He was a Foursquare pastor for 40 years. And so my childhood was all about church activity. We went to church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. We lived in a very rural community, and so we had a lot of land. I have siblings. It was really a great childhood. I loved growing up there, and I love to go back and visit occasionally too.
That's great. It is such a beautiful area.
Yeah, and so because I was raised in a Christian home, I did come to know the Lord at an early age. I was probably 5 when I said the prayer and asked Jesus to come into my heart. And so that's the way I got started, but it really grew and changed over the years, as I think it does for a lot of people. When I was in middle school, I went through a rough time. I was rebellious, and for no good reason, really, but just interested in doing my own thing. And I think that, when I look back at that time now, I realize that my relationship with Jesus was actually not really a relationship. It was a decision I'd made because of my growing up and the influence that had, but I wouldn't say that Jesus and I really had any kind of a relationship. And so even in the midst of making those poor choices, it was not really even about, me disappointing him or breaking that relationship. It was more about, well, he might be mad. So it wasn't really much of a relationship. Mm-hmm. And then something really interesting happened, as I think God often does for people, is that he brought somebody very instrumental into my life. And when I was in high school, I met a girl named Michelle, and she was athletic and popular and beautiful, and she loved Jesus. She brought me into her circle of friends, and I really looked up to her. As a result, a new type of relationship began to develop between me and Jesus.
That's great.
And I mean, that was, okay, so I was 16 then, and now I'm 53, so a whole lot more has happened over the years, and that relationship has continued to grow and develop and change. But that's really, I would say, the beginning of a real relationship with Jesus.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And I think it's so interesting, that picture of not really a relationship, but that Jesus would be mad at you. And so often we talk about on this show how we think so much it's about what we do versus about his love for us. Any ideas or comments on that? On just what relationship actually means or looks like?
I think that's a really interesting question. I feel like it has a lot to do with where my relationship is today with the Lord, because I grew up in a home that was very productive, and I'm used to being very busy, and people know me as a person who gets things done. and I do a lot of things for the kingdom. And so I think over the years I have actually not really understood that very well. And as the Lord continues to draw me into relationship and teach me about who He is and how He's created me and how He loves me, not because of anything I've done, but because I'm His creation, and He desires to have a relationship with me. And so that is something that I feel like is very much a part of even what He continues to teach me today. And a book that I recently read last year even talked about how He doesn't just love me because I'm good or do good things, because He even loves the sinful parts of me. Not that He loves the sin, but He loves even the deep, dark parts of me that are not good. He loves all of me, and it has absolutely nothing to do with what I do or what I don't do. And so He brings me into relationship. He loves me, and I don't have to perform. I don't have to do anything, but just like a child, just be with Him and enjoy His presence and His relationship.
That's great. Grace is given freely, but we still as Christians want to make effort to do what the Lord would have us do, but out of that relationship. So instead of I have to do this to gain favor with God, it becomes about this relationship. No, I want to do this because I love the Lord. I want to carry out what He would have me do in His kingdom, because I think we all fall into that thinking of I am what I do versus the Lord loving me. And I love that you mentioned that He loves even the sinful parts. That's really mind-opening, I think, because the Son came as man, and He did experience all of our temptations, but was without sin. So then that means we can trust that He knows what we're going through, and that means a lot.
Yeah, it does. The word trust is something that I'm continually working on. My personality is I like to control everything. I like to manage everything, try to get everything to work out the way that I want it to be. And I don't think that that also includes my relationship with the Lord, but if I'm honest, it does, because I want things to be the way that I want them to be. And I want to serve Him and follow Him on my terms and not His. I don't say that out loud, but if I look at my actions and I look at what my reaction to things that happen, I see that that is actually very true. And so learning to really trust Him no matter what is crucial. If I can picture it like a metaphor, it's like me in the driver's seat and He's in the passenger seat, and I may allow Him occasionally to reach over and take the wheel and straighten things out. But it's about me getting out of the driver's seat and maybe even getting into the back seat and trusting Him in a way that no matter what, even if things turn out differently than I think they should, that I know that He's a good God, that He loves me. He tells me I'm going to have trouble in this world, but He loves me and He has the best in mind for me. And He's also preparing a place for me. And so, I don't know, something you just said made me think about that tangent, but that whole idea of trust is so important. And I feel like it's a big part of the journey that He's had me on for many years and continues to have me on today.
That's great. I love that analogy. Thanks. Well, tell us a little bit more about your life since your teen years and some of those stories that have brought more trust in Jesus.
Okay. Well, after meeting Michelle when I was 16, the next person that God brought into my life that just transformed my life, really, that God did amazing things through, that's my husband. So his name is Steve. This June we will be married 30 years. And Steve is a great, great guy. He loves people in word and deed. He is a servant leader. He's just a great guy. I mean, I'm amazed again and again how he loves people. And I think, I got lucky because I didn't know, I was 19 when I met him. But anyway, I got a really good one. And so over the years, he has just been such a great companion in leading me to Jesus and praying for me and supporting me in many, many ways. We have 2 teenage boys. They are 17 and 19, and they both still live at home. So we are doing those years, and it's full and fun. And very often our house is filled with lots of teenage boys.
That's great.
In fact, over the weekend, at one point, I think it was Friday night, 7 spent the night. I didn't know who was in the house when I woke up, and so then it's quickly like, okay, what can I pull together? Pancakes.
Right.
And then the day was just filled with Nerf wars, and they were building a fort down in the ravine. And, so our lives are full and messy and fun, and I'm really, really thankful. But you asked about, a faith story. One of the stories that I really think has defined our lives in terms of trust and really learning how to rely on the Lord in a way that we hadn't experienced before was we experienced infertility. And it was pretty severe. For 10 years we tried, and eventually roads led us down to IVF, and that's how the Lord brought life into our lives. But in the process of that, it was really hard because all of those years, all of my friends were having babies, and I felt like I was in a constant carousel of baby showers, going to the hospital to take gifts, delivering meals, and it was so hard to enter into someone else's joy when their joy was very connected to my sorrow and pain. But the thing that God taught me during that time was that He loves me. He loves us. He sees me. He sees the hurt. He understands it. We see over and over again in the Gospels that He shows us that He understands the pain that we go through because He came as a man. You mentioned this. And He came completely experiencing every type of hardship and hurt and betrayal and denial. And during those years, I just learned how to rely on Him in a way that I never had before. And it finally came to a point where I literally laid every dream and hope that I had at His feet and literally said, even if I don't get what I want, what I really hope to have, I trust You. I trust that You have a better plan for our lives. And little did I know that would be like the beginning of learning how to trust Him. But I'm sure you know this as well, Ellen, that we are able to go to greater depths with Him in the middle of sorrow and in the middle of hard things, because then in those moments we're really honest about our vulnerability and our hurt and the difficult things, and it's in those places that He can meet us in a place that I don't know if we can really meet Him otherwise. When things are easy and beautiful, it's so easy to get caught up in life and just run. And when things are hard and miserable, all you can do is sit and say, I can't do this. I cannot do this. I cannot get out of bed. I cannot walk into another baby shower, And so, and I think like what He taught me then, He continues to teach me now, because it's not like everything's been easy since then.
Right.
There's still a lot of hard things. But He's present. And His friendship is very real.
Thanks for sharing that. And that's a long period to go through. So I can imagine it'd be easy to lose hope, but yet, to still be turning to Jesus and seems like feeling His arms around you and still loving you through it is really sweet to hear and very encouraging for all of us. That no matter what we go through, He'll be a rock there for us and cares for us. Cast your cares on Him because He cares for you.
That is very true, and I've experienced that. I think this is also a good time to just give a shout out, like a practical shout out, that journaling has become, and actually hasn't become, it has been for many, many years, just a steadfast for me. And I think one of the most beautiful things about journaling is being able to go back and remember how God has been faithful in hard times in the past. Sometimes I think when we're going through different things, I don't think we even always know exactly everything that's inside of us. So just putting a pen to paper and letting it flow, and even pouring out all the things, and then to be able to reread that and then to share promises in scripture and hope that either God shares through other people or through a sermon or through a book or through a song, and recording those. And then you have this beautiful collection of his faithfulness over the years and over the seasons. And I love those. They're treasures.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks for that recommendation. And just, I've noticed when it goes from my head to actually writing it out, there's a different level of processing I'm doing. It actually really is kind of coming together and forming more, and I'm able to reread that and process it even more, versus if it just stays in my head, I think I'm processing it, but then it just kind of flies out of my head and it's not as anchored, I think. And how wonderful to be able to look back at how God has worked. That's great.
Yes, I'm currently in the process of reviewing last year's journal.
Wow.
So I take the first month of every year and really dig into the things from the past year. Just, they're good remembrances, and they're also great ways to just remember, what did God teach me and show me last year, and what do I want to remember moving forward.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about your business and how that got started.
Yeah, so I am the owner of a small business called Travel on Purpose. It is a boutique travel agency. And the idea for this came, I think, COVID hit and a lot of things changed for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And that is true of me as well. I'm in that category. I had worked for an international nonprofit for a number of years, and that had come to an end. And there we all were at home playing cards and baking sourdough bread and listening to podcasts. I listened to my first ever podcast on a walk during COVID. But anyway, I really started to dream about the future, actually not knowing what the future looked like, because in those early months, nobody knew what it looked like. And one thing that my husband has always said to our boys is, what are you good at? What are you passionate about? And how are you going to let God use that for good in the world? And so I don't know. I really took that to heart. And one of the things that I'm passionate about is travel. And another thing that I'm passionate about is connecting people. I am known as a connector of people. I didn't do that on purpose. It just has been my journey, and that's a gift that God has given me. And because we have a lot of missionaries in our family, we have spent a lot of time visiting missionaries in the field. Also, as a family, we love to travel, and we traveled a lot. When the boys were little, I homeschooled them from kindergarten all the way through middle school. And if I go way back before that, I was actually a teacher in those years before we had kids, and even before I was married. I taught at the middle school level. I was a curriculum writer. I taught English and history. And so when we did eventually have our boys and we were traveling, we decided that we were going to homeschool. And so we homeschooled and we traveled. I wrote curriculum that was related to where we were traveling to, and we integrated history and science and literature, and then also philanthropy. And so those were beautiful years. We made a lot of amazing memories. But anyhow, fast forward, I just thought, what would it be like? I mean, because I'm so passionate about getting out and seeing things in the world and connecting to people, what would it look like to have a little travel business where we would plan trips that were culturally immersive, that supported the local economy, that enjoyed all those wonderful hidden gems that, you're not going to get by doing the normal touristy things. And then also at the same time, an opportunity to see how God is working in that part of the world. And a lot of the places where we typically vacation are developing countries where there are a lot of hardships and a lot of challenges. But there are people on the ground that are making a difference and are doing beautiful things. And so what if we were to come alongside and learn about what they do and see if there's a way that we might get involved? And so anyway, there I was. I mean, COVID kind of provided me a whole year to do all the businessy things to get ready. And I realized it was very risky to do this because here I am going to launch a travel company in a time when nobody's going anywhere.
Right.
And so is this even going to work? But I trademarked Travel on Purpose. I started an LLC. I got training to become a travel agency. I did all the things, and took the better part of 8 or 9 months to really get ready. And then as soon as borders opened, I reached out to a dozen nonprofit organizations, Christian organizations that our family had been involved in as donors, as advocates, and just said, hey, I've got this crazy idea. What do you think about me coming to see your work in person? Some of them I already had, but I'd love to come and spend some time with you, and I'd love to know what you think about me bringing people to see what you're doing. And so I launched the business with 7 countries and 7 organizations. And so in those early months of the world being partially opened back up, I mean, it wasn't super open and a lot of people weren't going, but I wasn't one of them. I was like, let's go.
Yes.
And so went around and visited a bunch of them and just started to connect. And then in September of 21, I led my first tour to Guatemala. And that was a women's trip. And that trip has turned out to be very popular because I just launched the 7th trip that I will lead in a few months. And so that is 7 trips, women's tours to Guatemala in less than 2 years.
Wow.
So I feel like Guatemala's become a second home to me.
Yes.
But anyway, so yeah, that's what we do. And in addition to the tours, I'm also doing private travel planning for people. So I will say that 99% of that is Guatemala. I think I've kind of built a name for myself in that space. And so almost all the requests that I get for private, whether they be for a couple or a family or a group of friends, I'm doing it for Guatemala. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Tell us what a trip would look like. So if I were signing up to go to Guatemala, what would I be doing?
Okay, so I'm heading back down there actually in a few weeks, and I'm taking a group of 10 women. I like to keep the group small because I don't want to travel around on a bus, and I don't want to stay at big hotels. I want to stay at small boutique hotels that are locally owned, that have beautiful character and design. I am also a little bit of a hotel snob, so I will say that I like nice, comfortable accommodations. So if you were coming with me in a couple of weeks, we would arrive in Guatemala City, and right away we would head on out to a little town called Antigua. It was the capital of Guatemala for many years before Guatemala City became the capital. And it is a Spanish colonial town that is very well preserved. So it has faced some hardship. Some volcanoes and earthquakes have caused some destruction a long time ago, not anytime recently, I will say. But they've done such an amazing job preserving this city that you walk in, and in fact, the first time I was there, prior to that, leading that trip in 2021, but the first time I was there, I arrived at night, and it wasn't until I walked out the next morning and I stood on the street and I looked up and down the cobblestone streets and the quaint little cafes and little shops and little town squares and the convents. I mean, I just said to myself, what is this place that I have never been to before? And why is everyone not traveling to Guatemala? And so it's just a beautiful place. So we spend a few days there. I love to start off with a cultural and historical walking tour so that we can kind of get the lay of the land and we can learn the history. I use a wonderful guide. She's an American woman, but she's been living there since she was 13 years old, and she is trained by UNESCO. So she's part of the preservation of the city. And so her perspective is very valuable. And then we also do things like we go to a stone carving workshop and we create our own unique designs of jade jewelry. We go to a 150-year-old coffee farm and we learn about the production of coffee from the plant all the way to how it ends up in our cup. We take a chocolate class and we learn about chocolate roasting and make our own chocolate bars. We hike a volcano And one thing that I'd like to mention is that all of our trips are very community focused and people focused. And so along with all of these wonderful travel sizzle things that you can do in Guatemala, the trips are really centered about learning people's stories. And so a couple of the partners that I have are people who have started social enterprises or small nonprofits, and they're working around in the Antigua area to help people in need. So whether that be through education, or there's this one lady that I love, her name's Annie, and she started a small business where she employs adults with special needs. And they make these beautiful handcrafted products that are made out of essential oils, things like sugar scrubs and insect repellent and different things like that. But we invite her to have dinner with us one night, and we do a nice little welcome gift for the ladies attending, and they get to have some products from their store. But we also get to hear about, she's a believer, and we get to hear about what prompted her, what brought her to Guatemala, and how has she come to be a change maker in her community, and what's her story. And so a lot of the trip is learning the stories of others. I mean, that also leads me to tell you about about Anita. Another place that we visit is Lake Atitlan. If you've not heard of it or not familiar with it, it's a gorgeous lake. Some people call it the European Riviera of Central America, because it's a gorgeous lake that has 11 villages on the shores. They're all indigenous villages with colorful buildings and houses and vibrant textiles. The people that live there don't even speak Spanish. Guatemala has 22 indigenous languages. Wow. And so, we have to remember that the indigenous people were there long before the Spanish arrived. And they have done such an amazing job of retaining their culture. So you see them wearing the traditional clothing that they weave with the backstrap loom. They create the colors with these textiles with plants and tree bark and vegetables and insects even. Wow. And we get to go and learn about that. We get to see how they take the cotton and spin it and then dye it and then weave these amazing things. And when we do that, this is one of the villages we visit, we also spend time with a lady named Anita, who's become a friend of mine. I met her because she offers a cooking class, and we go and we do her cooking class. Wow. But she has an amazing story, because she grew up in poverty. She is Guatemalan. She is of the Quicheme tribe. And she lived in a place where there were very few opportunities, especially for women. And when she was a young girl, a couple from Canada saw potential in her and an opportunity to develop her as a business owner. And so they taught her how to start her own little endeavor. And today her cooking class is very popular. In fact, you have to book months and months in advance if you want to get a spot. But what's so beautiful about Anita's story is that not only has she had a tremendous amount of success and has learned how to provide these amazing opportunities for herself and her family through her little business, but she turned around and saw that there were many others in her village that needed an opportunity and needed the ability to rise above their circumstances. And so she started this Weavers Cooperative, and she employs these single mothers. And when she first started, she started with 3, and today she has 25. Wow. So these women gather to do their weaving. They keep 75% of their profit. 25% goes back into the cooperative to pay for the electricity and the credit card machine and all those things. But it's just a beautiful thing. So I think what happens on these trips when we go down to Guatemala is we meet people who are change makers in their community. We meet people who God has given them a heart for a need in one corner of the world, some type of thing, and then He equips them to do it. And just getting to sit and listen and learn and ask questions, it's really a beautiful thing. And I think that's the nature of these trips, because when we go down there with a mindset to learn, we don't go down with a mindset to help or to
I like that.
Like that we are the wealthy Americans that are here to tell you how to better your lives.
Right.
No. I'm a sister just like you're a sister, and we are both daughters of Jesus, daughters of the King, and we get to sit in community and learn from one another and encourage each other and hear each other's stories. And then how is God inviting me into this story? Is he encouraging me to pray for her? Is he encouraging me to get behind a nonprofit that I meet there to support them financially? Is he encouraging me to go home and live a different way, to be more aware of where he's working and how he's working? So it's really about transformation of ourselves, when we put ourselves in that story.
Wow, that is really beautiful. I'm excited.
You should come.
I want to. I think I'm already planning that.
It is
really great.
It is a lot of fun. The main ministry that took me down there in the very, very beginning is a wonderful ministry called Kids Alive International, and they're an international global nonprofit. And what they do is they meet the needs of vulnerable children in that community. So depending on what country it is and what the need is, that's what they do. And in Guatemala, there is a very cyclical problem. It's gone on for generation after generation, and that is the sexual abuse of young girls. And it's really sad to learn about it, but Kids Alive is a hope-filled, Christ-centered ministry that is bringing about restoration and healing.
Wow.
And so they do that with a holistic wraparound care, everything from education and healthcare to teaching them who they are, loved by God. And they also have a whole justice team that goes after the perpetrator.
That's fantastic.
And they've worked with IJM, International Justice Mission, and they are doing really good work to bring about change in the whole community. And so we spend a half day with them. And again, we don't walk in as volunteers. We walk in ready to learn. And part of that day is getting to tour one of their facilities where they house girls who have been rescued. And we get to attend their chapel service. We get to have a craft time and a meal time with them and get to know them. And we get to do a prayer walk. And we get to just ask the question, like, how is God inviting me into this story of Kids Alive? And maybe he is, maybe he isn't. Maybe it's just even the awareness that, wow, God is redeeming stories all around the world. And every time I sit at the Oasis Center at Kids Alive and I hear their story of what they're doing and how God redeems and loves each one, I can't help but hear myself in that story.
Wow, that is fantastic. I think I'm already yearning to go on one of these trips.
Please do.
That's wonderful. What other places do you go to?
Well, the 6 other countries are mostly in Latin America, and then we also have Uganda and Serbia. We did take a group to Uganda last summer, and we partner with a school there that's doing incredible work to transform a nation. It's really amazing, and I love that country. But I will say that I've had a little bit of a shift because I just recently accepted a part-time development position with another global nonprofit. So I'm wearing 2 hats. And what that means is for Travel on Purpose, I will continue to... There's a few things that we do. Guatemala, wholeheartedly. I feel like God has called me to continue, and I love what's happening in Guatemala. So I will continue to lead tours to Guatemala and plan private trips for Guatemala. I also have a book club that I love. That in a minute.
Sure.
And then I do a Saturday email where I share encouraging news about the partners that we have around the world and travel tips and all kinds of things. Every Saturday I send an email. And so that's all going to continue. But what's going to change is all the other countries where I have partner organizations, whether it be in the Dominican Republic or Ecuador, Uganda, all over. I am going to be a catalyst for making the appropriate introductions and then passing on any requests for trips to a trusted travel partner, which I have some amazing people that I've worked with over the last couple of years who have a very similar philosophy to travel that I do. So I really feel like that's a good way to be able to say yes to both opportunities, because after a lot of prayer, I didn't want to say no to this new opportunity that also presented itself. So you could say I'm wearing 2 hats and I have kind of 2 part-time jobs going on.
That's great. That's great. And I'm excited, as I said in the intro, to share the information about how they can find out more about this in the show notes.
Yeah. And I've really enjoyed the encouragement that I've received from people who know me well to say that, you're in the perfect place at the perfect time to be doing what God has called you to do. And so Tirza International is the new one that I'm working with on a part-time basis. I'm doing their director of development position, and I do have a long history of development work in nonprofit. And I love the ability to encourage others towards compassion and generosity. And Tirza International is an international nonprofit Christian organization that is working in 35 countries around the world to bring opportunities for women. Women who are marginalized because of everything from, trafficking, HIV, illiterate, not able to have an education because they haven't been able to in their community because of cultural norms and all of that. But we partner with global leaders who are already there on the ground working. And we do that through micro-enterprise, so giving women an opportunity to start their own businesses. And it's a beautiful curriculum that lets them know how loved they are and that they have amazing potential in ways that God has gifted and equipped them. And Tirza is also working in the area of leadership development and then also local sustainability. So it's a very good fit for me. I'm thrilled to have been introduced to them a little over a year ago, and just how that journey has progressed to where I am now, and I'm now working with them.
That's great. Well, we'll put a link to them too. And how do you spell that?
It's Tirzah, and it's after one of the sisters in the Old Testament. You'll have to find it. It's in Numbers.
I'll look for that.
Because there's a reason behind that name.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. Wow. Is there anything else you'd like to share, either a God story or some insights that you feel like God has been showing you lately?
Well, let me just briefly say something about the book club since I said that. Yes. And if anybody was wondering if I was going to come back to it, I don't want to leave it hanging. So with Travel on Purpose, we have a book club, and we've been doing it for the whole duration of the business starting. And originally it was just a way to connect people and to read books that inspired you to travel. But I came to realize over the course of the last year that many people who follow me on social media or who read my Saturday email will probably never travel with me. But why are people interested in Travel on Purpose? And we do have a large community of followers. And I think the reason why people are interested is because people are naturally curious about the world and about how is God working in the world. And so we pivoted the book club this past year, and the book club is now for a purpose. It has a subscription, but every book that we read is connected to a global nonprofit that is making a difference in that community where the book is set. So this year we'll do everything from women's microenterprise to refugee help to patient capital and microloans to education. And with each of the books, and they're amazing books that we're reading, the women or men, actually, but it's all women, who participate in the book club get a subscription box that has gifts that are indicative of that region of the world. And then 100% of their subscription fee goes toward a special project that we get to learn about while we're reading the book. And so literally our fingerprint is on something tangible that's happening somewhere in the world, which means that no one has to get on an airplane to go do something like that. Right. By reading a book and being a part of a community like this, they can make a difference. And so it's pretty exciting.
What a fabulous idea. I'm amazed. And it sounds like anyone can join it.
Anyone can join it. Quarter one is currently closed because gift boxes are already on their way to being shipped out, and we sold out actually. But quarter two will start soon. We'll be reading The Beekeeper of Aleppo, and we'll be talking about the plight of refugees. Wow. And partnering with Hope for San Diego in San Diego, Great. Who receives a lot of refugees.
Wow.
So yeah, it's exciting, but certainly just go to travelonpurpose.com and you can find the book club, and we'll be taking new registrations for that soon.
Terrific. How many people do you have for your quarter one?
In quarter one, we have 40 participants.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you all get together and talk about the book?
We have a couple of Zooms, and then for people who are local to San Diego, we are going to have local meetups. So next month we're heading to a Nigerian restaurant to sample Nigerian food because this quarter we're reading The Girl with the Louding Voice.
Wow.
And that takes place in a rural village in Nigeria.
That's fantastic. Wow.
Probably a place most people wouldn't travel to.
Right.
We get exposed to that culture, through a book. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, so many great stories. Thank you so much, Dianne, for being here today and sharing your heart with us and just broadening our worlds as well with all that you're doing. So I'm looking forward to exploring your website, Travel on Purpose, even more and following you as well. So thanks again.
Thank you, Ellen. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. This is Ellen Bennett with the Extraordinary Lives podcast.